My name is Kjelleren. I'm a photographer, multimedia artist, and social entrepreneur. One of my dreams when I was younger was to bring the experiences and the amazing people I'd come to later know in my life back to my childhood home in my small town of South Hero, Vermont. As a photographer, I've captured images of incredible people, but the conversations I've shared with them during our shoots has perhaps left a bigger impact on me than any portrait, intimate moment, or lifestyle image that I've shot. During a shoot, I really learned so much about what drives people, what scares them, what inspires them, and in turn, I'm learning more about myself. The world needs more stories of hope, inspiration, and positive change. In this Sea Change series, I'm welcoming you to my childhood home in the island of rural South Hero, Vermont, to be a part of a shoot and conversation with some incredible people. We'll talk about their journey, their vision for a better world, leadership, and the importance of creativity. Please allow me to introduce you to Eyeé.
You walked in somewhere awkward. You just walked in.
I don't know. It just felt like it.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
I know.
Our nice little cozy setup.
Yeah.
Oh, that's some tea. It's tea time.
Thanks for coming all the way to Vermont. Appreciate you.
I'm excited to be here, man. Vermont is pretty lit.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people to make it lit, but the ones that are here are like good people.
Yeah.
I'll pass on the snow though.
Yeah, it's a lot of snow. A lot of snow. So maybe we'll start a little bit with, I feel like I know a fair amount about you, but I'd love to hear more about your origin story, like where you're from and like how you got started being interested in tech and what were your upbringing was like, stuff like that.
So like technology was not something that I like dreamed about doing as a kid. I think it was something that definitely shaped my reality very early on, just from like where I grew up. You know, I'm one of 8 kids. I'm on the lower end. I'm 6 out of 8. So I had a lot of older siblings and stuff like that. So yeah, 8 kids in one house. It's like you watch whatever they want to watch on TV, right? So when we got our first computer, like being able to go and use it as a source of entertainment, play games like Doom, play games like Oregon Trail, was really, really dope and an awesome experience for me to kind of find my own place within the chaos of our home. It was like technology and books were the 2 things. Mm-hmm. But in technology, how'd I end up working in it? So funny story, my first job in life was actually doing criminal things. So by the time I was 16, I had ended up in juvenile hall. I was facing 27 years in prison and 3 felony charges. And a lot of things happened that ended up, you know, making sure that's not where I ended up at. But when I was there, this guy, I had come out of juvenile hall, like as a part of, what do they call them, deferment programs. Mm-hmm. I was like one of the first people in my county ever to like get them. And there was a guy at my mom's church, and he came up to me one day and he was like, yo, you're too smart for this. And I was like, bruh, you're not talking about money, I can't hear you. So next time he came up to me, it was like a couple weeks later, he was like, yo, you're too smart for this, and I know all you care about is money, so I'm gonna make a deal with you. And he slaps this big old book on the table. It's like, knocks it down, and then he spreads $1,000. And I said, if you do every exercise in this book, I'll give you $1,000, and I'll give you $100 to start. Halfway through that book, I was selling websites. And so for me, as I was in that critical moment of transition, like I had dropped out of high school because I didn't want to be around those same folks and get caught up in that kind of behavior, for me to have someone come and literally pay me to do something else, and then me find a way to use those same kind of like skills that got me in trouble in the first place, like the hustle, the grind, the consistency, the like ability to talk well, to like build a little small business for myself, is really how I started in technology. And then it just became the road that I traveled to get out of that lifestyle and build a different reality for myself and my family.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's impacted where you are now and wanting to be more in education and mentorship and working with youth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like when the imagination is the biggest nation in the world, we can all freely become citizens of it. But when you grow up in certain socioeconomic realities, when you grow up in the hood, when you grow up in low-income neighborhoods, when you grow up in families where you have a parent who's addicted to drugs, even if you're middle class or whatever and financially stable, like your imagination gets redirected into survival. So instead of thinking like, what can I create for myself? Or what would it be like if I traveled to this part of the world that I've only seen in a book, right? You get stuck of like, how can I creatively stretch my money to pay this bill and this bill even though they're both gonna be late, and then like not lose water or heat or have my phone cut off, right? Your imagination is also the thing that determines what comes next for you, right? So like, if you don't have someone, if you live in a reality that's locked around survival for whatever reasons, right? It doesn't have to be trauma or anything. It could just be that you don't know nothing else. Like, you don't know what's possible out there because no one's ever put you on game. Having someone come outside and help, kind of like how we do with little puppies, you clear like the boogers out their eyes in the morning, right? It's like having someone come and do that to help you expand your imagination so that you can envision a different reality for yourself. It's so critical to helping youth shift. My reality would be very, very different if someone hadn't come and helped expand my imagination. So I feel it's only right that I go back and do that with youth today.
Yeah, that's rad. So how old were you when you started building the websites, and what happened after that?
I sold my first website when I was 17. And I sold it to someone at my church, wanted a website. So I sold it to them. And then from there, it was like referrals. And then I literally needed to build a portfolio. And I like knew that not everyone was going to pay me. So I remember I went on Craigslist. And I was like, yo, I'll make a website for your small business for free. Email me. And like probably out of the 100 emails I got, like 95 of them were spam, but then the other ones are actually dope businesses, right? So by that point, I got my GED. I started at community colleges trying to figure out what was next, trying to figure out how to fully disconnect from the folks who were in the criminal circles that I used to run in. And I would like go to this event in Oakland. It was called Afro-Rican night, like Afro-Puerto Rican food at this bar called The Liege. I'll never forget this shit. So I'm there one day and I'm coding something, just an idea a friend and me had. And so I was like doing like animations on it, like way back in the day. And this big old dude comes up behind me, big old Rick Ross looking guy. He's like, yo, what you doing? You coding? And I was like, who is this Rick Ross looking mofo behind me? Like, sir, I don't know you, and your breath's got a kick. But nah, he was like, well, yo, I have a marketing business. I'm looking for coders. Come see me tomorrow about a job. I went up there and he gave me my first professional job as a software engineer. So I ended up building websites and some like mobile apps for like politicians in the area, for like small businesses, for like pretty big organizations. And he promoted me over and over again. So I went from like being the person fixing the bugs to being like the lead engineer and managing a team of folks at like 20. Mm-hmm. So that was like my first job in coding because someone at a bar was breathing a little too close to my face.
So how'd you go from that to publishing, academic research and working with these incredible, impactful companies in ways that they are?
Yeah, so how did I go from a high school dropout to a two-time college dropout to a published academic researcher? When I was going to community college, right, like starting that process, I realized that I lacked the fundamental discipline to be like successful at like the 4-year college level. And I had gotten a full ride to UC Berkeley. So I went from like a GED to full scholarship to the #1 public university in the country. And I was like, yo, I don't want to fail out. And also I needed a different sense of financial security. So I did what my older brothers did. I joined the military. So I ended up spending 2 years in Afghanistan at like the headquarters of this like special operations headquarters that they set up. Working for this 2-star general who went on to be the 4-star general that commanded all special operations for the military, doing crazy technical stuff. That experience, I think, really shaped a lot of how I do what I do today, but I also needed like time and space to recover from it. So when I came back from Afghanistan, I went to Atlanta and I worked at a consultancy a tech consultancy that focused on school districts. Mm-hmm. So I was like building tech for schools. So it was like a good full circle moment. Ended up going to Japan. This general that I had worked with in Afghanistan called me and was like, yo, come out here. But I was like, bro, I don't want to go to Japan. He was like, but it's a tropical island. And I literally put in my 2 weeks notice the next day. Wow. And 2 weeks later was on a plane moving to Japan. And then ironically, Microsoft, while I was out there, Microsoft DM'd me on LinkedIn. And this was before they bought them, but it was like, wow. And so when I got that DM, I sat at and looked at it, and it took me 3 months to reply. I was like terrified. I didn't think I could qualify. Ended up getting a job, worked there for a couple years. And that's really when I started to realize that technology is not inherently neutral because we don't apply it neutrally. So like where I was like, well, of course, when I was in the military, the way they use technology, it's like weapons, war, bombs is different. But then when I was at Microsoft, there was just projects that I was working on that were really fun technologically, but they were getting rid of jobs for people who look like me. They were displacing my community. And I was like, I don't want to be the person that builds that. I want to do something else. So then when I transitioned over to Google, I stepped away from the tech piece of it. I was like, I want a non-technical role. I want to build up my like operation skills, but I want to do meaningful work. So I ended up going to the ML fairness team, a machine learning fairness, which now is like a whole department with the VP. It's like crazy. It was like 6 of us when I first started there. And as I was there, just starting to see some of the issues that occurred across all different types of AI that no one was trying to fix. Like everyone was writing papers about how bad it was, but nobody was saying, what can we do about it? And something my grandma used to say to me, she was like, baby, if you could see a problem, it's because you got a part of the solution. And so I felt like if I keep seeing that AI, especially computer vision applications, whether that's facial recognition, face ID, cameras, photography, like it cannot see black and brown skin well. How come no one sat down and asked the why question enough to fix it? And so I ended up starting a research team that focused on that. We ended up finding an improvement to that problem that like ended up fixing a lot of things in Google's products. So much so that when they put out their Pixel 6 phone, they had a whole Super Bowl commercial just about how much better it captured skin tones. This is my research team's technology was plugged into that. And then we ended up giving that technology away for free to the world so that anyone could use it. So that's how I went from like a GED to these corporate streets.
So you've had a lot of experience and perspective. How do you feel like creativity has kind of played into the impact in the work that you've been doing?
I think creativity shapes how I do the work that I do. One big thing that I really leaned into is like I'm a very punny person, right? So like I like puns and I like things that are meaningful. So like even what I would name my projects was all intentional. I come up with like cool names and it kind of like became what I was known for, right? People would be like, yo, you started this program, you started that program. They have such good names, right? And they like asked me to name their stuff. So outside of just the names, it also informed the way in which very much so I approached the work at Google that I did. This work where like we're having to solve problems that there are no computational, like there's no existing fix for. We have to like figure out how to approach it, ask questions curiously. So like with the skin tone work, we knew what the issue was. It was well documented. It was this color scale that people had been using, and it was a 6-point color scale that was created in dermatology that like the darkest point on that scale is like my skin tone. So if you're building algorithms to recognize people's skin tone and the darkest point don't represent most black and brown people, of course it's not gonna work. The question was, well, what's the better scale? And when we were doing that research and trying to figure it out, we uncovered more problems, because that's kind of what happens. You go through a solution, another problem pop up. One of the problems was like, okay, even if we had a better color scale, the way that you might label someone's skin tone is going to be different than the way I would. So if we only go to one place in the world and have them say this is what this person's skin tone is, then we're forcing that group of people's vision on the rest of the world. So it's like, okay, well, we could just keep doing what we've been doing, or how do we creatively approach this? And so we had to like sit down, put our heads together, and it like reminded me of like, okay, well, we got 6 bills due. How do we like make our money stretch and make it work? Because also like to expand and have other countries participate in that process was like expensive. So I like did some like Jared, just hooked it up, used a fraction of our budget to get it done in like 9 different countries around the world, and took kind of that same approach, the same pulling from the same place that I used to pull from to survive, to be able to build things that allow people to thrive.
I was thinking about how so many of our youth today really want to figure out what their like purpose is and how they can impact the world in a positive way. And is there things that like pulled you out of a rut or helped you heal yourself and figure out where you wanted to be in the world that like set you on the course of where you are now? Or is it just like over time you kind of found the courage and confidence to fight for what you love?
You don't just have one purpose in life, right? Like if you'd asked me what I wanted to be when I was 16, it was very different than when I was 8, very different than when I was 20, very different than when I was 24, and very different right now in this moment. You know, that what your purpose is what you choose. And that I firmly believe there's no mistakes, there's only what happens. And I think a lot of times young people forget because we feel so trapped into the like imagination that's been given to us about what you can do. Like the real reality is right now, if you hated everything you were doing and you wanted to get up and move to Bali, well, I mean, aside from immigration, but you wanted to get up and move to Bali and be like, screw this, I'm never going back to the US again, you could do it. No one's gonna stop you. It's just about what you're choosing. And I think 3 things about how to know when you're in alignment. You never want to compromise your character. You never want to compromise your morals. And you never want to compromise your integrity. And as you grow and change as a person over time and have different experiences, your character, your morals, and your integrity will shift. But you never want to come out of alignment with those.
So I feel like you've had a lot of kind of mentorship come in and out of your life. Is there some advice that really still sticks with you, or any mantras or anything that's just like top of mind when you're going through a hard time or you're trying to get to that next level?
This is actually my first tattoo. It says nothing beats a failure but a try. So like, again, just that like, I don't know if I'm gonna go jump and like make it happen. It's like, no. The only time I'm gonna 100% fail is if I never try. The other one is, it's in Spanish, but it says, con solo tener una pesadilla no significa que uno no debe de dejar de soñar, which means just because you have a nightmare doesn't mean you stop dreaming. And so just that reminder that like, yes, the sun sets, but it always rises. And you don't want to be someone who only like finds peace in only the sunshine, right? Or also someone who like only loves the night. You need like a balance in both because there's a different kind of beauty in it.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever have times where you think about yourself as a kid and like how far you've come and how they'd be so proud of you? And like, what does that feel like to like kind of like, if you do, what does that feel like to kind of look at yourself as a child?
Yeah. So I think absolutely, me and my inner child, we besties. Like I go to Dave & Buster's multiple times a month just so my inner child can come out and whoop somebody in a whack-a-mole game, right? But something that I realized probably in the last year of my life is there's this notion or idea of distance traveled, where you started and where you are now. Look how far you've come. And what I realized for me is that was causing me to reject earlier versions of myself. I'd be like, dang, I was so dumb then, look at how far I am now. Or like, dang, I didn't know better then, and I know so much, I would never do that. And it was like a silent form of rejection. And so now when I look back at the different versions of myself, whether it was the kid who just wanted to play on a computer and, play Doom or play whatever, whether it was me with my first PlayStation, whether it was me in jail, like, oh my God, I might really be stuck here for my adult life if I keep making these choices. Whether it was me in war, like, oh my God, this is like, people are actually dying in this scenario, and they look like me, and the things these people are saying are kind of wild. Or whether it was a version of me that got that Microsoft LinkedIn DM and was too afraid to reply for 3 months, right? I'm grateful for all of them, because I'm only the person I am now because they are the people that they were. So like, that person I never should have dated, I'm so grateful you was hard-headed and dated her anyway, because I wouldn't have that wisdom if that wasn't the case. I'm so grateful I was the version of myself that was rebellious and free enough to make stupid decisions that landed me in juvenile hall. I'm not happy about who I harmed in that process, but that same freedom and like, fuck what you feel, like I'm gonna do it anyway, is the same mentality and energy that helped me create the research team at Google that literally taught AI how to see Black and brown people. So it's like, those versions needed to exist so that this version could exist. So I'm always looking back and reflecting.
What's something that gives you hope right now?
Something that gives me hope?
It doesn't have to be a physical thing. It could be...
Nah, it's my 10 nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
Seeing them full of joy as beings, and just seeing their curiosity about the world. My youngest nephews, they're twins, they're 5. The oldest is 16, going on 35, right? And so to see their desire to make the world better for themselves and to know that I have the opportunity to provide a foundation for them to do so, I think that really gives me hope. It's like, change is not something that we always see. You know, like my grandmother didn't get to live to see me buy the house that I was able to purchase. She never visited, but she laid that foundation, you feel me? And so the changes that we may want to see in the world, we may not live to see them, but building that foundation and knowing that those who come after us are going to be able to build on what we created is like super inspiring to me every day.
So you talked about your nieces and nephews and how they bring you hope for the world. Do you want to talk a little bit about the way that you want to be impacting education and things you care about and what you want to be doing next?
I think one of the biggest things that I took away from my childhood is that when I started learning about technology, it didn't come from the education system. It came from someone who cared enough about me as a human to literally bribe me to try to learn that information, because he saw it as the future and he knew a little bit about it himself. So when I had questions and things, he would help me. And from that, what I realized is the most important thing to being successful in a world where everything is constantly changing is to learn how you learn. Because when you learn how you learn, you could teach yourself anything. And I think something that we're missing in education, but particularly in tech education, is that you can't just have a one-size-fits-all formula. So like a lot of content out there for computer science, and I saw this when I was at Google, was like they have free computer science courses, but kids from certain communities don't take them. Why? Because it'll be like super scripted and like, hello, welcome to CS 101. Today, it's like, nah, bro, they're gonna cut that off. We live in the TikTok generation where kids are like watching 30 seconds of video for hours at a time. So you can't have something that doesn't have like the right edits, the right chops, the right, engaging material. It has to be designed almost as if it's a piece of content intended to be consumed on social. And as we move into these next generations, there's tons of research across industries that shows that short form video content is what they want. So figuring out how to take this knowledge that I have, whether it's about AI, blockchain, or quantum physics, compartmentalize it and shrink it down into these 1 to 2 minute bites that kids can consume in a way that is like culturally accessible to them. So I'm not, finna be out here talking like, the United Nations predicts that the GDP for artificial intelligence is gonna be like, yo, AI is about to bring a really big bag, and this is how it's gonna do it, right? Like just keeping it clear, getting that message across, meeting people where they are, and like, let me just bridge that gap and bring it back to you.
What do you feel like the impact will be if you have more like caring and empathetic and like creative people that are entering that space?
I think something that really stuck with me from my time at Google is that it's really easy to build something that works well for somebody who's like you, for yourself. But you have to be intentional about building for people who are not you. And the reality is that within different communities of people, there's infinite diversity. And so I think what's absolutely necessary is a shift in the way in which we think about technology, to move away from the way we group each other socially and into this idea that in order to build, we have to communicate with people who are different than us, which requires you as an individual to be deeply compassionate, to be deeply self-aware, to know the limits of what you can and can't contribute. The only way that you can build something that works well in someone else's reality is to include them in that process. And I think if more people are more self-aware, aware of their own limitations of what they can and can't do, knowing and caring enough about the people that are going to be using the product to not make decisions about whose reality matters more. There's an inherent level of importance that's given to different user groups. That's the way our capitalistic system incentivizes companies, especially tech companies, to think about their user groups. So all people are not built equal because all users don't spend equally. All users don't significantly contribute to growth, which is what they're, 1, legally bound to do for their shareholders, and 2, what the purpose of the company is to make money, not do the right thing. So I'm excited for a future where these next 2 generations that are coming up, they're some of the most empathetic, most connected, most like passionate that we've seen in recent history, who are so intentional about everything they do. When they become the shapers of technology, I just hope that we don't leave them systems to inherit that prevent them from being able to exercise that empathy in the same way that maybe our generations have had to trade off when we go in there. I guess if there's anything that I just really want people to take away from this is that everything is always going to change. And you have 2 choices. You can either be a victim of change, where you just live in a world where everyone else shapes that, or you could be a shaper of change. You could be someone who's intentional about the way that these things work, about the way that technology gets used in society. And to be a shaper of change doesn't mean you have to be some super nerd that like goes and learns computer science and learns to code. You could use your own individual creativity to make a difference in the way the world turns out. So I just hope that in the remainder of my life, in my lifetime, that I get to continue to use my own creativity to design a future that I'm proud of for those who come after me. And I hope everyone else gets to say the same for themselves.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy.
Thanks for having me be a part of your community.
Yeah. Cheers.
By the way, this is probably the best ginger tea I've had ever.
Damn.
What did you put in this? Can I get the recipe?
Some maple syrup.
It's the maple syrup.
And I'm a little OCD in like making sure I cover the lid so you got the tea to steep in enough and not
Oh. It's the maple
What?
syrup.